Welcome to Healthy Mind, Healthy Life, the show where we talk honestly about what it actually takes to keep showing up for ourselves, our minds, and our lives. I'm Yusuf, and today's guest brings something this show does not get to explore often enough, a perspective shaped by time, lived experience, and the courage to begin something deeply personal in a season where most people are told to slow down. Our guest is Paula Panariello. Today, we are talking about writing in the senior years, about what creativity does for the mind when it isn't tied to ambition or career, about identity, voice, and the quiet rebellion of starting something just because it matters to you. And by the end of this episode, I hope you walk away with a softer relationship with the question of when is it too late? Because the answer might be very different than you think. With that, I welcome my guest Paula to the show.
Thank you so much.
So, Paula, before we open up the deeper conversation, I want to begin somewhere a little gentler. So, writing is such a personal thing. And what was the moment you realized you wanted to write, or what was it that finally gave you the permission to begin?
Well, you go through your life and you look at retirement as this thing out there that you have to get to. And you're so busy, you don't think about what is that going to look like when I get to retirement. And I got into it, and my husband was also retiring. And I was like, well,
Mm.
what can I do? I want to do something new. I want to do something different. And I had never been a writer in my life, but I was an avid reader and I loved historical romance. I loved the escapism of it. I loved the happily ever after of it. And I thought, I think I could do this. And I was
Mm.
very, very blessed to meet a good friend of mine who was an editor. And she and her husband kind of gave me the courage to go ahead, sit down, and write a book.
Wow. And can you describe how was that? How was your experience writing your first book?
I had no idea what I was doing. My friend said to me, go ahead, write this story. I'll look it over because she and her husband would get hundreds of books a week to look through. And she said most of them I knew by the first 10 pages that they weren't that good. I sat down in 2 weeks and gave her a very rough draft. And I thought she was going to tell me, forget it. This is not your thing to do. And she got back to me and she said, "You know what? This is pretty good." And I said, "But my English is atrocious." And she said, "Well, there's that, but we can fix it." So that's how I got started with it. And I loved it. I loved the creative aspect of it. I loved making up the characters, giving the characters personalities, setting them in different formats. And for me, it was just a real outlet and it gave quality to my retirement years.
Yeah. And ma'am, there is a misconception I think a lot of people quietly carry that creativity is something you either pursued early or missed entirely. That writing specially belongs to people who started decades ago. So I'm curious what you have come to understand about that now that you are writing in this season of your life.
You know, it's a funny thing about that because I've had a lot of people that are seniors that have heard that I sat down to write and they said, "Oh, you must have been doing this for years." And I said, "No, I was a nurse in my career. My last
Mm.
English class was 40 plus years ago with Penn State University. I had never given thought to doing that. But I felt that for me, was a creative outlet I could pursue. I mean, I don't have artistic ability in the sense that I could sit down and paint. I mean, my idea of art is stick people. But I felt like this was an outlet for that creative side of my personality. And, the worst thing you can do in retirement is to think that you're just going to sit down and just relax and enjoy this. As my 100-year-old aunt would tell you, when you stop
Hmm.
using your mind, it turns to mush. And I didn't want that to happen.
Okay. And what would you gently say to someone listening who has wanted to write for years but keep telling themselves they are too late for it?
Everybody has a story. And a lot of seniors that I have spoken to have said, I would love to write my memoirs for my children or my grandchildren. You realize when you look back on your life that you've had a lot of learned experiences, either at work, with family members that you knew that your children or your grandchildren will never know. And
Hmm.
to think that you can't write is crazy. You sit down and you write. It may not be the next great American novel, but sit down, write it, see where it takes you. I mean, the idea that you have to sit down and have a whole plan mapped out and know exactly where you're going to go, even if you're writing memoirs, you never do. You just sit down, you write, and you do it. And I think seniors discount those years of experience. And we all could use those years of experience.
Yeah. And that is such a tender thing to hear because so many people are walking around grieving creative dreams they think have expired when they've only been waiting.
Yeah. Absolutely. I mean, you have to the perfect time to do that is in retirement. You don't have those pressures of work and family at home and all of these other things. You don't have time to be creative then. It's great when you're retired and you have that time to pursue that aspect of your personality or your mind. I mean, even if it's cross stitch or knitting or whatever that thing is that you would like to try or do, the perfect time to do it is when you get to retirement. I mean, and it's so much easier now because when I started writing, the first thing I did was I Googled, how do I write a romance novel? And the first one that I wrote was that mechanical. I mean, they told me in the first 800 words, try to get a hook in. And I was like, a hook? What is a hook? Then I had to Google that. I mean, it was that mechanical. Now I sit down and I write the stories. They come to me. I'm a pantser. I don't have anything planned out. I just write it and let it go where it takes me.
Yeah. And writing has a way of revealing things to us that we did not know we were carrying, like memories, regrets, joys, part of our stories. So, as you have been writing in these later years, what has the page started showing you about your own life that maybe surprised you?
Well, it's a little hard to relate that for my life because the era that I write about tends to be that Jane Austen era in early 1800s England. And that happens to be one of my challenges is making that time frame and making those characters and those people relatable to an audience today. And, one of the things it has shined a light on for me is realizing how tough it was for women back then. Even if you had status and class, and money, you were very much in a box. And even in the world in which I was raised, I mean, women sort of tended to go, I'm going to be a nurse, I'm going to be a teacher. That whole world has opened up so much. And I like to write a little bit more empowered women in the stories
Hmm.
that I write.
Hmm. Now, that is so quietly powerful. Writing does not just record a life, it helps us understand the life we have actually been living.
Yes. It does. Absolutely. I mean, like I say, even if it's something that was in the early 1800s to now, you still can make those characters in ways that are relatable for people that are reading those books to see themselves in it.
And for someone in their later years who feel a quiet pull toward writing or any creative practice, but they are not sure how to begin. So, how does that beginning actually look like in real life? Like the honest version, not the polished version.
Well, for me, I was blessed to have a person to help me in my friend who was an editor. However,
Okay.
she did recommend books. I read some books about writing and, got a lot of little helpful hints. Not everything I could use, but a lot of little helpful hints. And it is so much better in this day and age because you can Google it. You can get online, you can look it up, you can see how it's done. You can go to classes, you can do whatever it is you wanna do. If you're just looking to write the family memoirs, which a lot of seniors are looking to do, there are actually books out there that give you a format basically, and you're kind of filling in the blanks. And they also ask you questions that elicit memories or elicit ideas that you may have forgotten or not thought about that you can add to those books. So, those are all formats that as seniors you can follow.
Mm, see. And what is the inner conversation you have had to keep having with yourself to keep showing up to the page? Especially on the harder days.
Well, it's funny when you start a book, you think, oh, I've got this great idea. I've got these characters. I've got them in places and they're doing things. And, writing a novel is a marathon because it is thousands and thousands of words, and it could be 33 chapters long, which is what most of mine are. And I kind of do great going out of the blocks about the first 10 chapters or so because I love to introduce characters and personalities and, do some research, trying to put them into different situations. And then you get into those chapter 15 to 25 because you got to know where you want to take the end. And it's like, well, what am I going to do with these people for the next 10 chapters? And one piece
Mm,
of advice I got from all of the things that I read on writing a novel is number one, if it doesn't advance the story, don't write it because people are going to lose interest because can't keep saying the same thing over and over in every single chapter. And the second piece of advice I got that was so helpful, which was from the great writer Lisa Kleypas, was that you can always do research. Anything that you're writing, even if it's a family memoir, and you wanna add some color and say, "Well, Uncle John had this farm and we farm milk cows." Well, you can look up what was it like for a milk farmer back in the 1940s, just
mm,
to give your family members a little bit of color as to a taste of what that person's life must have been like. And that's something I like to do in my own books. I like to do this research because the more things change, the more they stay the same. And I can look up things that were happening in that time that are actually very similar to things that are happening now. So, that's how I like to add that kind of color and whatnot.
mm.
and keep it going, keep myself motivated. I like to make it interesting for myself. If I'm just writing different versions of the same book, it's not too interesting.
Yes. That is such that was such an honest answer that I loved it, because the hardest part of any creative practice, it usually is not the skill. It is the permission and the drive that you want to actually do it.
Oh, yeah. Absolutely. Because the whole time I was writing the first one, and even the second one, I was thinking, Paula, who is going to want to read this book? This is just you jotting down all these things from your own crazy head. And who's really going to want to read this? Do you really want to do this? And the other thing is, when you're writing, you're exposing elements of yourself in public, even if that part of yourself is totally made up story and has no relevance to you. There's still those characters or aspects of who you are.
Yeah. Yes. And one of the quiet gifts of writing in the senior years is that it isn't tied to a career or external success or the noise of building a name. It is, I think, pure and sure is yours, like only yours. So can you talk about what does that for the mind and the spirit do? And when you create something that does not have to perform.
Well, for me, I don't get as much joy as I do when I have people walk up to me and say, I just love that book. When are you going to write another one? And I'm like, you really liked it that much? I'm shocked. I'm shocked when they say it. I still am. And it's, I'm like, I'm glad that I can share this thing that I enjoy so much, and it's just such a pleasure for me. So, and it does give you confidence. It gives you a great deal of confidence to do other things, try other things. You never know what you can succeed at until you get out there and try. And like I said before, there's no better time to do it than when you're retired and you don't have all these other things that are taking up your time and your energy and your creativity.
Mm, yeah. I love that you don't separate creativity from mental wellness, because they have never really been separate, have they?
No, they haven't.
Yeah.
You know, it, you, it is, it goes hand in hand. I mean,
Yeah.
when you feel well mentally, you feel well physically, you can be more creative. And vice versa. I mean, if you're not doing anything and you're kind of living the same repetitive day after day after day, you can't be creative. I mean, it just stifles it. So, being able to sit down, being able to type, to get into all of these new worlds and people and learn all these different things, you need that mental stimulation. And it's more important for seniors than for any other age group. Like I say, my aunt told me, you don't use it, you lose it. Your brain turns to mush. And that's true.
Yeah. Paula, for people who are listening and who want to connect with you or want to read your works, where can they do that?
My website is Paula, Panariello, Panariello.com. And you can get my books on BookBaby, Amazon, Book Nook, any of the different popular sites. They're available.
Perfect. And to everyone listening, all these links are in the show notes, so just go and check those. Paula, is there any last message that you want to leave us with?
You know, I just want to reiterate that whole idea that, retirement cannot be at the time in your life where you think, okay, I've got here, I'm just going to sit in this chair and count out the days of my life. You're going to get bored very, very quickly. And you also think, oh, I'm going to travel, but there's going to be a long time in between trips or whatever else you're going to do. You have to find those things that keep your interest, whether it's going to your local senior center, sitting down, typing up books,
Mm.
playing pickleball, whatever those activities are. That's what keeps your mind healthy. That's what keeps your body healthy. That's what keeps you going.
Paula, this has been such a beautiful and grounding conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on your show. Have a great day.
You too, ma'am. And to everyone listening, if something in this conversation reached you today, I hope you let it stay. Maybe there's a creative something inside you that's been waiting quietly for years. Just have to start because the truth is, the years you have lived so far were not a delay, they were a preparation. And whatever you make in this season of your life will carry a depth that only time can give. This has been Healthy Mind, Healthy Life. I am Yusuf. Be gentle with yourself this week. Pick up the pen if you have been waiting to. We'll be here when you come back.